Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll, my podcast series. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is the November episode of my podcast series. If you want to find out more about me or my previous guests, you can feel free to listen to previous episodes on my website on carrollcoaching.com or go directly to the voiceamerica.com business channel. Be sure to download the app or tune in using your favorite podcast app. If you missed last month's podcast, I chatted with Talitha V, my colleague and friend, and we looked in detail about the work of Gabor Mate, specifically his book, When the Body Says No, The Hidden Costs of Stress. It's a fascinating body of research, and we highly recommend you look into it. I am particularly excited about my guest today and the conversation we're about to have. And first, before I introduce my guest, I want to give a shout out to Danica Stefanovic. Now, Danica, I met a number of years ago in Lausanne, Switzerland. She's a project manager based there. And Danica recently was kind enough to connect me with my guest, Yogesh Soni. Yogesh, welcome.
Thank you, Amy. So good to be here and so good to be connecting back with someone from Lausanne. As I just told you previously, I lived in Lausanne also for 7 years. Always good, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. So for listeners, if you don't know Lausanne, Switzerland, it has a couple of hallmarks, home to the Olympic Committee, I guess, the International Olympic Committee, and many other things. It's a gorgeous place. So if you're looking for an excuse to take a holiday, come visit us in Lausanne. And Yogesh, you're currently in California this morning. Is that right?
Yes, it's a beautiful morning. Like always, it's always sunny in California. It's very, very true.
Well, we just had this extraordinary sunset tonight. So I'm feeling pretty good about life these days.
Yeah, so, I remember some of those actually. Yeah.
Tonight, seriously, it was like whip out my phone and take pictures and walk down to the lake and take more pictures. That's how beautiful it was.
Nice. I'm looking forward to the pictures. And by the way,
okay, I'll send you one.
And by the way, I do have some flu and cough. So I apologize to the listeners if I get into a fit of cough midway.
Yeah, not to worry. Listeners, if Yogesh has to go on mute for a minute, I'll fill in with something entertaining, I'm sure. So before we jump in, I want to give the listeners some of your bio, Yogesh, so bear with me.
Sure.
Listeners, Yogesh is the founder and the CEO of Transcend Tech Incorporated. He helps tech companies increase the effectiveness and well-being of their distributed workforce. He loves building deep technology products, meaningful businesses, and close-knit teams. He plied his trade first as a software engineer, then as a product manager, leading large teams and shipping several products for the world's top tech companies. This is something that Yogesh, you and I share in common. You are we're both lifelong learners. So I love knowing that. And I think that's part of the reason why I feel so intrigued by the work that you do and what we're going to talk about today. And unlike me, Yogesh has several degrees, engineering degrees from IIT Kanpur, ETH in Zurich, an MBA from UC Berkeley. Anything else, Yogesh, that I missed?
I wanted to start my PhD, but my wife said no.
Thank goodness your wife put her foot down. Honey, I am not doing that on top of it.
That's why I needed to teach myself something. So I just chose a topic and wrote a book about it.
Oh, well, there you go. She's like, okay, you're allowed to write a book. No more degrees. Yogesh's balanced outlook on business, community, and life is a healthy mix of the best aspects of Indian, Swiss, and American cultures. Realizing the cutthroat work culture in most tech companies is adversely affecting the well-being of employees, he embarked on a mission to change the status quo. In his debut book, Digital Belonging, he dreams about a world where every person feels invigorated by their jobs. He believes well-run businesses can usher tremendous positive impact on society while providing excellent returns for shareholders. That's really impressive. And I think it's important that there's things to think about. If people who want to read this book, they're going to love the book if they want to work in an organization where they're looking forward to Monday mornings, where they feel valued and they contribute to the success of the organization. And if you're a leader who genuinely cares about other people and wants to build a high-performing team organization. So, listeners, if that has not intrigued you enough, I don't know what will. Though here we are, we're going to jump right in. And Yogesh, what I'd like you to do is start by sharing how more about your education and your career journey than what I mentioned.
Sure. I started my journey in India, and like most Indians, I was destined to become either an engineer or a doctor, right? But I was not looking forward to dissecting frogs and stuff. So I chose engineering, and it helped that I really like mathematics and physics. So I went to this school you mentioned, IIT Kanpur is one of the premier institutes in India.
Yeah.
And that was when I first encountered, independence, breaking away from your parents and things like that. I was supposed to be looking forward to this journey initially, but I got panic attacks and anxiety as I separated from my parents.
Oh, sure. That happened to me too.
Really? Right. Yeah. And it became quite serious. I was hospitalized for a number of times. And the first year was like that. But the next 3 years was awesome. Like I found it was like the feeling where you have uprooted yourself from a comfortable position, from your community, from your parents.
Say it again. You did what from a comfortable?
So
uprooted yourself. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. You uproot yourself from the community that you're so close to.
Yeah.
You have friends from school, your parents,
Yep.
your extended family, cousin, and then you give that all life away, and then you uproot your life and you go to a completely unknown place, which was like 1,000 kilometers from my hometown, right? And it was sort of anxiety inducing for me.
Yeah.
I got over it. I did not think much about it. I thought it was just something to do with, I'm eating different kind of food maybe, or or inhaling different kind of air or whatever, right?
Right.
So I didn't think much about it at the time. And then the next 3 years passed quite wonderfully. I used to live in a hostel with other students as well. So that was quite fun for me. During my bachelor's in engineering, I got a chance to visit Europe for an internship for 3 months.
Okay.
It was like a sleepy village in eastern part of Germany. It's called Ilmenau. Probably you've never heard of it.
No, I have not.
No, right. It was like really, really like a very small place. And I loved those 3 months. I traveled all across Europe. The only place I could not travel to that I really wanted to was Switzerland, because Switzerland at the time was not part of the Schengen thing, and I did not have a visa to go to Switzerland.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And that was like, okay, I need to go to Switzerland. So that was in my subconscious mind. Right? Went back, I graduated. I was working in India for a company called ST Microelectronics for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I was waiting. It was actually a Franco-Italian company, and I was waiting for them to send me on a business trip to Europe.
Right.
That did not happen in 2 years. So I was like, okay, I just gonna do it myself, right? So I quit my job. I applied to one institution in Switzerland for my master's, and that's how I got it. So they gave me some scholarship. They gave me an apartment to live with some other.
And this is ETH in Zurich.
Yes, so it was actually a new program by ETH Zurich and Politecnico di Milano.
Yeah,
and it was in the Italian part of Switzerland. It's called Lugano.
Oh, you had to go to the Italian part of Switzerland. Oh, you poor thing. I feel so bad for you.
that was just 1 year, but it was not so bad actually. So I met
not so bad.
Yeah, my friends were from all over the world, really, like Colombians, people from Uruguay, Nicaragua, to Lithuania, Beirut, Lebanon, right? So that's where I discovered that Beirut is also a party happening place. Right? I never knew, right? So that was fun time. So there was a theme that was evolving. I was absorbing this multicultural things and ways of doing things, right? And my flexibility or flexible outlook was evolving, if you will, right? So when people are usually born, they do things in a certain way. And if you've lived in for a number of years in Switzerland, you know what I'm talking about, where Swiss have like a very proper way, tack, of
Yes.
doing things, right? But I was also seeing the differences from, especially Switzerland is like very different from India. India is
Right.
super chaotic and Switzerland is
Mm-hmm.
super organized, right? And
Right. Right.
I was trying to imbibe and making sense of both the cultures, right? When I moved to finally to the French part of Switzerland, which was in Lausanne, I
Yeah.
was so fortunate. Well, initially not so much. I was working for a startup, and that sort of was closed in the 2008 crisis, and they shut down just like a week before my wedding. That was not so.
Oh,
So
bad
yeah,
timing.
yeah, so I went back to India and we were like having a big wedding with 3,000 people. And so I didn't tell any, we didn't tell the family. Of course, my wife knew. But, being an employed is sort of a taboo in India, especially when you're
Being a
getting married.
what?
Being unemployed,
Unemployed is
right?
taboo.
And
Okay, yeah.
it's huge taboo, right?
Right.
Imagine that I'm on a stage in a wedding and shaking hands with 3,000 people who I don't know, have meeting them for the first
Right.
time. And I cannot do that if I am not, not earning any money, right? So that's why people,
Right.
all the people knew that the guy is working in Switzerland,
Right.
is in
Right.
Switzerland. Right? But anyways, after that, what I discovered was the Swiss social security, where Switzerland, they paid me my like 70% of my salary. They paid for me to learn a little French. I did pick up some French then after.
Bravo.
Oh yeah, merci
Très
beaucoup,
bien.
merci. Um, and uh, and from there, I found another job, and that turned out to be the best 4 years of my work life in Switzerland. It
Uh-huh.
was a company called Marvel Semiconductor Saal, MSS for
Oh, say it
short.
again.
It's Marvel Semiconductors Saal,
Got it.
MSS for short.
Mm-hmm.
So MSS was such a unique place. So we were only about 70 people, and
Yeah.
but 17 different nationalities there, right?
Amazing.
Amazing. And what was unique about the culture? First of all, uh, the quality of talent that was working there was extremely high. Like
Uh-huh.
really, and I don't say this lightly, really the top engineering talent in the world. And it was combined with very easygoing culture where people were working hard, but at the same time, uh, having coffee, taking long lunches
Uh-huh.
somewhere
And
by the lake.
let me
Yeah,
ask about how old were you at this point?
I was about, so let me see, probably 27, 28.
Okay, so this is still very early in your career. So what I think I'm hearing you get at is that this had a huge influence in shaping you as to what was an ideal work environment. Is that an accurate guess?
Absolutely. So those were absolutely my formative years,
Oh,
and I
I
was
see.
learning how the world is or what should be, probably,
How
right?
it should be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to give you an example, people here often talk about things like team building. Yeah, team building is an extra thing that you must do apart from your work. You take time on your calendars every 6 months and you do team building, right? So this is like super weird, but there, we were team building every day, every
Right.
single day. It was
Right.
part of our job, right? It was not
Right.
apart from the job. For example, um, me and a friend of mine, we taught our colleagues from Belgium and from Swiss to how to make Indian chai with ginger, the Indian way of cooking chai. And it was
Fabulous.
them who were cooking chai for all the 10 team members
Uh-huh.
every single afternoon, right? For us, right?
Oh, after you taught it to them, they would do it all the time. That's
Yeah, they're
great.
and they're right. And we're just all of us drinking chai in the afternoon and like every single day team building, right? There were Italian folks who would go bring pesto from Italy that their mama cooks, and they will come and make some nice spaghetti with pesto della mama, right? So this is all team building is happening
Yeah.
organically, naturally, right?
Yeah.
And moreover, and there was one thing about almost like an apprentice mentor relationship within the team always. So everyone was looking to learn from everyone else and teaching generously. I was doing the same thing. And I didn't even know this. I was not doing it consciously. I was just doing it because everyone was doing it. It was a convention, right?
Right.
And there was one person, there's one lady who came back from her maternity, and she was struggling initially. But I
Yeah.
spent quite a lot of time with her, teaching her, coaching her. And then there was this all hands meeting, and she acknowledged my contribution. And that's when I first hit me that, okay, I was doing something out of ordinary, or was
I
it,
got it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I thought it was just part of my job, right? And so we had this amazing team where we were so close knit. We were not only meet having fun in the work, but after the work also. So we would go every Wednesday night. We'll meet together. We took trips together. My
Yeah.
boss taught me how to ski on his family trip in France. Right. So this is talk about like leaders investing in their team,
Right.
right? So
Yeah.
this is like taking someone
Yeah.
and outside of work and teaching them how to ski, right? So this is
Wow.
unheard of, right? So this is what I was experiencing.
Yep.
And then when I got a chance to move to US, they offered me a leadership role. They asked me to lead a team simply because our there was this talk of how good this team is, the software team is. All the software engineers in this small team are way better. So I was working for Marvel. Marvel is actually based in US. It's in Santa Clara, and
Yep.
they had I think 6 to 7 thousand employees worldwide. Majority of them actually based in US. And we were
Okay.
such a small team, but the headquarters knew that this is a very talented team.
Yep.
And when Marvel acquired a team from they did the so-called acqui hire. They
A
wanted
what
me to lead
hire?
it. It's called acquisition hire. So they
Acquisition
acquire,
hire. Okay.
right? Acqui hire for sure.
Equi hire. I was like,
Yeah.
do you have to swim some laps? So I don't get it.
Right.
Is there
And
a
they asked me
horse
to.
involved?
Yeah, it was sort of quite close, right? It's pretty tricky actually, right? So they asked me to lead the team, and that's how I moved to US. It was supposed to be a short trip, but for some reason I ended up staying back in California for a variety of reasons. My son was born at the time. He was 1 year old when we moved, and he just we just got a nice daycare. It was pretty hard to find for daycare in Switzerland, so we got a daycare here. So we are like,
Yeah,
okay.
you don't have to justify it to me. I understand.
Right, so we are like liking it. And there's also in California the weather, and there's
Right.
also huge Indian community here as well. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll
Mm,
stay for a while, right? I ended up staying longer than I expected, but Switzerland is always very close to my heart, right? Now
hmm.
coming back to the cultural shock. Initially, saw something which was like aloof culture, but I could understand it or try to justify it where
Which are you talking about in California or Switzerland?
in California, right? So it
And
was
it,
very,
okay, so aloof. Okay.
yeah. So which I could try to justify because there were 3,000 people in here. There were like huge buildings and things like that. So of course you can be a very close knit and co-workers if you're just 70 people in a small site versus 3,000 people. So I said, okay, yeah, this makes sense, right? And then I ended up eventually working for other companies such as Cisco and eBay.
Say
And
it
I was
again.
start
You ended up working
for other companies,
other companies. Okay.
Cisco and eBay.
Cisco. Oh yeah, I know them both. Okay, very well.
And I moved also. I did a number of changes, right? So I have moved from another country to US, and at the same time, I was also doing my MBA while working full time.
Of course you were.
And and I made a career transition from being a software engineer to being a product manager, focusing more on the business side of things, right? So too many
Okay.
changes for me, uh, and I did enjoy my work specifically. And in the US, there was this definite get things done attitude
Hmm.
and thinking big and executing on this audaciously and relentlessly and things like that. Those are the things that I really enjoyed. Um, but there was still a sort like undercurrent of something that I didn't like, and I sort of I was sort of trying to accept it,
Right, of course.
but core of my being was rejecting it for
No,
some.
my boss taught me to ski. I don't want to give that up.
Right. And then, interestingly, UC Berkeley House Business School runs on principles, and one of the principles is question the status quo.
Oh, wow.
Right. And I'm
Ding,
like,
ding, ding, ding.
okay. So who I was like, okay, I'm ready to question the status quo. Who exactly
Where?
am I going against? Right. I was not really sure. Right. But then uh, something was cooking inside my head and subconscious. And I was
Yeah.
just talking to everyone, my friends, my coworkers, and I would ask them, hey, how are you guys doing? And people are like, fine. Then I understood fine doesn't really mean fine, actually. Fine means, yeah, I
I'm
could
not
do,
miserable.
I'm I'm not miserable, I'm just getting by, or
Yes.
something like that,
Yeah.
right? So I was trying to understand how can people be really fine. And to me,
Like
that was
fine in the sense of great, good, positive,
great.
happy. That you mean like
Exactly.
fine.
Exactly, right? So there was this sense of resignation in people that the work is supposed to suck. And I was like, no, it is not. I I have experienced differently, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was different. Had I been brought up in this culture, or if I had always worked in American companies in US, in California, probably I wouldn't know, right? But I knew differently. I
Yeah,
had seen
exactly.
different.
You had tasted the sweet life, and it
Exactly.
included pesto and chai made by colleagues.
Exactly, right? So um, there came a time where I said, no, I think we could be different. And then I started researching some companies. And yes, in huge part, in especially in US, there's this strong individualistic culture. So the larger society is built that way, as opposed to where I came from India, and I think to a certain extent in Switzerland as well,
Got it.
right? And that is something to do with it, but also this a really cutthroat culture of competing, growing at all costs. A lot of investor money coming in. There's a huge pressure to grow very, very fast. There's also huge pressure to show some revenue growth every single quarter and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a long pressure, long over-indexing on driving the shareholder value, if I must say, right? And that was having some side effects on the employees, namely that they were essentially getting burnt out,
Yeah.
right? And it is kind of hard. So it's almost like employees were collateral damages in all this madness, right?
Yeah.
And it was noticeable, but for
Yogesh,
some, yeah,
I'm going to interrupt you in about 30 seconds. We're going to take a break. So give me just a little pause in about 30 seconds.
sure.
Yeah. So keep going.
So when the pandemic hit, all of this seemed to come to the front collectively. When
Yeah.
people went back to their homes, working from their homes,
Yep.
suddenly it was like a switch that had turned on, and people were like, okay, I know I'm struggling. People got time,
Okay.
right? And that's when I said, okay, I need to do something about it.
Okay. Okay, great. That's a perfect spot for us to pause. So I'm going to do a little publicity for both of us. So listeners, we're going to rejoin in a few minutes to find out more about Yogesh and his book. And you can connect with Yogesh directly. Now, Yogesh, would you like them to reach out to you on LinkedIn? Is that the best way to get in touch with you, or Twitter? What do you prefer?
I prefer LinkedIn, and my
Okay.
handle on LinkedIn is Yogesh K Soni.
And that's YOGESHKSONI.
Correct.
Great. Okay. And listeners, I am super excited because 3 years ago, before the pandemic struck, my plan was to do a 1-week retreat in Bali. And I am finally happy to say it is going to happen in May 2023. I'm hosting the complete retreat from the I think it's May 20th. Maybe it's May. It's sometime in May, early May, late May. Well, you'll find out more information on my events page on my website, and that's carrollcoaching.com. And if you're ready to take your superhero partner powers to the next level, you can join me on my online leadership presence course. You can also find out information about that on my website. When we come back, we're going to be hearing more from Yogesh. So stay tuned. You're listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back, listeners. My guest today is Yogesh Soni, founder and CEO of Transcend Tech Incorporated. He's helping tech companies elevate the effectiveness and well-being of their distributed workforce. So we've been talking with Yogesh about his background and his path to what brought him to what he does today and how he came to write this book, Digital Belonging. So Yogesh, where we left off was about, you're saying, okay, the pandemic hit and people are like, basta, enough is enough. You know, I'm not taking this anymore. So pick it up from there, if you would.
Sure. And like millions of people, first of all, there was untold suffering. People lost their loved ones. And that if that will not make people question what is most important for their lives, that I don't know what will, right? And that is the point where I also started asking the same questions. Thankfully, fortunately, I did not lose a loved one, but my friends did. And it could have been so easily me, right?
Yeah.
And I have enough empathy to feel for their pain, and their pain was my pain, my loss, right?
Yeah.
And right about the same time, I hit this midlife crisis. I probably is real now. So I read this interesting book called 4,000 Weeks, which says
4,000 weeks.
Yeah. So if you ask someone how many weeks do you live, right? People will say,
"Oh yes, I heard about this book." Who's the author? Do you remember?
I forget the name of the author, right?
Okay,
but
I'll have a look while you're doing that.
Right. But people would answer that I'm going to go live for 50,000 weeks, right? It sounds like human lifespan is such a long time, but it's just 4,000 weeks if you just calculate, right? And I had already lived 2,000 weeks. So I was like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of 2,000 weeks, right?
Okay, it's Oliver Burkeman. So for listeners, if you're interested. Okay, great. Keep going.
So one thing was clear for me, that I cannot be miserable for the rest of the 2,000 weeks.
There are already a couple of weeks too many in those first 2,000.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I was also super clear that I loved building technology products. I love working with other smart people. It was clear to me. But for some reason, the organizations that I was working in somehow did not pay enough attention to be intentional about designing a workplace that is conducive for people to come in and do their best work.
Not intentional enough. Okay.
Not intentional enough. So I thought, well, we can do something about it. It seems like a problem, but seems like a problem that we can actually solve. And that's where my investigation began. I said, okay, my mission is going to be helping organizations to change in the way we work and the way we behave with each other, so that employees are, instead of being always stressed out and burnt out, they are energized, happy to do the work, doing great work. And when they are doing great work, consequently, the business is booming, right? It's such a simple concept, but unfortunately not super easy to implement, because large organizations come with the larger the organization is, harder it is to keep everyone aligned, keeping them at their best behaviors and things like that, right?
Okay.
So a blueprint was needed, and I started with investigation, what exactly is needed. There was, interestingly, also a very big paradigm shift that was happening. People working in co-located offices together imagine 3,000 people in one building or a couple of buildings close by, to a completely distributed workforce where every person is working from their own office. So I think in terms of computer science, like a cloud data center versus millions of nodes distributed
Okay.
throughout the geography, throughout the globe, right? So I
All
was
right.
thinking
All right.
that way.
You're losing me a little bit. That's okay. I trust you. You're going to
Yeah.
be able to bring it back around.
So what happens really is when the employees are distributed, the communication is exponentially harder.
Okay. Got it.
Okay. And but communication is actually the bedrock of collaboration, of
Preach it.
teamwork, right? You know
Yep.
this, right? You
Oh,
know
yeah.
this. Who would know communication, right? And then one thing that I read in your book, right? When two people are communicating together,
Mm,
it's not only important what they're saying, but how they are saying it,
right.
right? When
Right.
people are calm. So one thing I learned, one takeaway, key takeaway, when you're talking to the other person, if you appear to be calm, it's respectful for the other person,
Yeah.
right? And if you pay respect to other person, you get the respect back.
Yep.
You get it back, right?
Yeah.
And this is a strong correlation with my book. Bedrock of my book,
Okay.
key to the best workplace is dignity and respect for everyone, right?
Yeah.
So,
And it's funny, going off on a tangent for a minute.
yeah.
I've been living in Switzerland for 27 years and I'm still this American.
Yes.
So it's not going anywhere. And I get to travel around the world and people want to resist and they think, "Oh, it's too American, it would never work here." And I say, "Well, actually the currency is respect. You show high respect. Is that essential in your community and in your culture to show high respect for yourself and high respect for the other?" And they say, yeah. So the currency is the same. And then that starts to help them see, oh yeah, no, this is pretty universal.
Right. And say how do we communicate when we are distributed? We are communicating through Slack messages, through
Yeah.
emails and Zoom calls, etc. Right? Somewhere that respect, dignity, valuing other people. People want to be valued. They want to be recognized. They want to feel as if they belong, right?
Right.
So where is this community in the workplace where they would feel they are belong, right? When they are inherently distributed. So that was my aha moment when I realized that this is not the sense of belonging, the sense of community, the sense of respect, proper communication. It's not gonna come about by itself. It's not gonna rise by itself. There is I'm gonna go in physics a little bit.
Okay, all right. I'll just go for it. If you see tears coming out of my eyes, you may know it's too much.
There's something called a second law of thermodynamics, which says
say it slower. Say it slower.
The second law of thermodynamics states that the entropy of a closed system would always increase. And entropy is nothing but randomness, a measure of randomness.
Okay.
So for example, if I leave my house, if I don't do any cleanup, you can guarantee that my house will be a mess. And
eventually chaos
and the chaos will rise. So it will not be clean or tidy or whatever, right? So I have to put in energy to make it tidy.
Okay, I kind of got that. All right.
Same thing with
Thank
the
you for the cleaning example.
Yeah, so same thing for the distributed workforce. The people, clarity in the organizations, alignment, dividing up the work properly, making sure everyone is working, they know what they're supposed to be working on. Everyone is working on the stuff that is actually moving the needle and doing something positive for the business impact, doing something positive for the customers, while people are feeling that they love working here, they're valued by their coworkers, and they feel that their coworkers, managers, and leaders care for them. So how is this going to work?
Yeah. You read my mind. So Yogesh, you may have some more you want to share, though. I'm really eager to hear more, and I think the listeners will be too, of how do we concretely make that happen?
Sure. So very first thing, you start with a baseline, you measure where you are, right? And you can measure essentially everything, measuring whether everyone is treating each other with respect. Um, could be done via different tools, right?
Yep.
When you were located in an office, you, as a manager or as a leader, you could just walk around, and they called it managing by walking around,
Right.
right? And you could sense the mood of the people, right? And you could see how people are behaving and things like that. When things are happening virtually, it's kind of harder. You could still be joining Slack rooms and you could be part of the conversations as a leader. And you could simply sense and see how people are behaving with each other. Just look at the messages, public forums, right?
So do you have specific tools that you've developed that can measure people's perception of respect? Is that what I'm hearing?
So I have not, because it's very easy actually. With the current technologies that we have, you could do what we call a sentiment analysis with natural language processing using AI on people's Slack messages, right? But I'm suspecting that it will not go down well. With people might think, or employees might think, that that's violating their privacy in certain sense, right? So I think it's easier at this point of time to just rely on surveys, and you can
Surveys.
in the surveys you can easily ask some of these questions, and then
Okay.
these surveys could be like, quite regular, I would say, at least once a quarter, please. Right? And you could be asking questions around, specifically around, how do you feel? Do you feel that you're valued? Do you know what is your role in the company? Do you feel respected by your manager? Do you feel respected by your leaders? Do you have trust in your leaders, and things like that, right? So
Okay.
you could be asking these questions, and then you can easily get a sense or a pulse from the team, right? And I found in my past also these things come out quite openly. For example, there was this survey that came out that less than 50% of the team thought that there was any transparency in the organization. And transparency, what I mean is just what's going on. Are we doing good as a business? What's the next project? Is my project gonna be killed? What is my coworker working on? How am I gonna grow in this company, for example? How am I gonna get that new promotion and stuff like that, right? So all of this, people just don't know, right? And it was a strong indication that, and it is quite natural if you think about it, right? Because in the office, you can actually see some of this. You know what your coworkers are working on because they're sitting next to you.
Right.
Here, your window to your organization is this computer screen that you're looking at, right?
Right.
That's the thing. And now, if this information is not coming through, there's definite information loss. So people have to spend energy to create this information intentionally, right? So the pillar number one, transparency, is the pillar number one of creating organizations where people are not too stressed out, because lack of transparency transparency creates stress and anxiety in people, uncertainty, anxiety, and when there is an anxiety, yeah.
So that's the first pillar.
That's the first pillar, right?
Okay.
So you have to be intentional of creating information. How? Just get some simple, just get a convention in your company that every single project you're gonna write it down. What are we doing? What is the role? Who is responsible? Who are the team members? How am I gonna get promoted? What is the level of responsibilities that next level of promotion requires, and things like that, right? So all of those things, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that is happening quite a bit is this is this Microsoft data that came out recently, which said the number of Zoom meetings or video meetings have more than doubled since 2020. So now imagine if every employee has 8 hours every day.
Yeah.
And if they were doing like 4 hours in meeting, then it's 8 hours now, right? So time is finite. So if you're meetings in back-to-back meetings all day long, you're not going to be working. You're not going to be producing software. You're not going to be focusing on sales calls with your customers and things like that, right?
And Yogesh, speaking of time being finite,
Yeah.
we only have a little while left. So I know I may not have given you a time check. So I want you to know in the 7-8 minutes that I have left to have you share, what else are you wanting us to know?
Sure. So I think it's better to do few things right rather than doing a lot of things, right?
Nice.
So I'm just going to focus on these two things: transparency and a different way of collaboration. Okay.
Okay. And I like that. Thank you. Because that will give us a chance to do a deep dive in this next part about the collaboration. And the reality is, I'm guessing a lot of this stuff is people can reference your book to find out everything else.
Yes.
Good. Okay,
Totally,
great.
totally.
All right, listeners. So this is, you're going to get the collaboration part.
Totally. So now coming back to this meetings, right? So not only are we spending much more times in meetings and not spending enough time on this focused deep work of writing code or writing that marketing collateral and things like that, but also the technology itself has been shown to be not good for human brain. There's something called a Zoom fatigue.
Yes, heard that.
Right. And we have seen research where there was this ERG done on people where
there was what on people?
I think it's called EEG or something like that, where you essentially connect electrodes to your brain.
The EEG,
and you can,
yeah.
Right. And you can actually see what's going on. In this particular case, they were looking at also the stress levels of how it goes when someone is on back-to-back meetings.
Yeah.
And that they clearly showed that the stress rises to alarming levels when you are in back-to-back meetings, right?
Yeah.
No break. So not only are employees not working on high value stuff when they're in back-to-back meetings, but they're also getting stressed out, which further inhibits the creative thinking, creative part of the brain. So I suggest completely different style of working, which is called asynchronous collaboration.
Okay.
Right. So synchronous is when two people are talking
same
or
time,
chatting
like
real
now.
time, same time. And asynchronous is I write down something and then I pass it over to you.
Yep.
And then you, when you get a chance, you add your comments, your thoughts and things like that. And we can do back and forth, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Now, this may seem inefficient, but truth is, at any given time, people are working on a lot of projects, right? So if I send you some information about project number 1, and I'm awaiting your reply, I could be working on project number 2 or project number 3.
Right.
Right. And I can be doing it on my own time when I best feel I have the highest energy to be working. Completely uninterrupted, blocked time for focused work.
Right.
And at this point, I will also recommend a book called Deep Work.
Deep Work. I've heard of this. Say more about it.
Yeah, it's from Cal Newport. I think he's a professor of computer science in Georgetown University in Washington. Check it out. He's pretty good. The idea is pretty simple. If you are too distracted, your brain just does not have the same amount of energy and focus to provide to a creative task. As simple as that, right?
Okay. Yeah, I just got it here. Deep Work, Cal Newport, you say. Okay.
Exactly. Right. So the idea of asynchronous collaboration or async is simple. Provide as much as flexibility and accountability to employees where they can work at their own hours, and they primarily work through artifacts. And these artifacts could be written documents, which can be shared easily, or written, these days, there's everything that could be shared. Software code can be shared very easily. The designs that the UX design, UI design, those artifacts can be shared easily and multiple people can collaborate directly on the file on the cloud, right? So
And
the tools are there.
yeah, what I'm hearing is that very simple idea of working asynchronistically.
Yeah,
You're giving back a sense of autonomy and independence, which is so crucial for so many adults,
exactly.
even
Exactly.
kids.
Even kids, exactly, right? So
And just as a side note, I remember hearing some quick little video about a guy saying, if you want to create a confidence in your child, get them independent as quickly as possible. Or actually, it may have been this woman who has two daughters who are CEOs and one daughter who's a doctor. So, apparently she has done a pretty good job raising her kids. And so I think her philosophy was, we do it. No, I do it, we do it, you do it. So that sense of independence. So, all right, going off my tangent.
Absolutely. So in fact, my second pillar is autonomy, transparency and autonomy, right? The other two pillars were community and technology, TACT for short, TACT, TACT, transparency, autonomy, community, and technology.
Oh, wow.
But for the other two pillars, people can go and read my book.
Sure.
But absolutely, asynchronous communication or collaboration is all about autonomy. And it's not that you do only asynchronous collaboration. Certain things like connecting with people deeply can still be happening synchronously, either over a Zoom call or in person.
Yeah.
But the idea is to identify not everything should be a meeting, right? I
Right,
would say
right.
the meeting should be an afterthought, no, not an afterthought, but it should be done only if it's absolutely needed, right?
Right.
Asynchronous collaboration is by default, people while you're working. But if
Yeah.
you want to get together for having fun, chit-chatting and things like that, get on a meeting, right?
Yeah.
But not for things like status meetings. I don't know if you have gone through the status meetings where there's 30 people.
You just blew my mind.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, 30 people in call. It's not 1 hour meeting, it's 30-hour meeting. Think about it.
Right.
It costs thousands of
Right.
dollars.
Good point. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I love what you just said. What if meetings were, I'm not saying only, because sometimes it need be, what if meetings were primarily for socializing, connecting, gathering, team building, and that they were done could you imagine how that EEG would, that stress level would be completely decreased, because it would just be a completely different energy and mindset.
Absolutely. And
Wow.
there are definitely certain complex discussions, for example, sensitive topics. If there was some, I don't know, performance feedback to be given, right, those kind of things can be done in one-on-one meeting setting. But imagine those things are not very frequent, right? You don't give performance feedback every single day to people, right? But generally speaking, people should be working asynchronously and getting on meetings as and when required, when really required.
Okay. So Yogesh, this time has literally flown by. And I want to ask you one last question in a very concise response. What is your key message the world needs to know about your book?
Key message is, if you prioritize the well-being of employees, you are going to build an organization that's going to last and create tremendous value for shareholders as well as for the society.
Wow. That is a message that people need to hear. So thank you for writing this book. And I have, I want to ask you, you might have a call for action. I'm going to say my call for action is people get a copy of this book, read it. It's called Digital Belonging by Yogesh Soni. Did I say the last name right? Soni?
Soni.
No, with an O, Soni. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, and so if you want to contact and reach out to Yogesh, remember he said LinkedIn is the best, and that's Yogesh K Soni. So YOGESHKASONI. And do you have another call for action that you wanted to share?
Sure. So I'm currently working with senior leaders, specifically from technology companies, I've seen that technology companies have more or less stuck to distributed workforce, barring few exceptions, like Twitter recently, but more or less, right? So, and I think those leaders have got it right, where they value the needs and choice of their employees. But running a distributed workforce is hard, and even though we have been doing it for the last 2 years, I don't think it's optimal. So if you're a leader who's struggling with this, you can reach out to me.
Okay, great. So the call for action is, if you're wanting to have the kind of organization that you have described that people are capable of, they should reach out to you.
Yeah, you can reach out to me on email as well, yksoni@transcendtech.io.
Super. And listeners, my call for action to you is to check out the Bali retreat that's going to be in May 2023 for my week-long masterclass, Overhauling Your Relationships and Taking Your Communication Skills to the Next Level, both personally and professionally. And that's carolcoaching.com. Also, listeners, be sure to switch on, tune in, listen up, and be inspired next month, because I'm going to be interviewing Karen oh boy, I was rehearsing this. Give me a second. Mangia. That's it. Karen Mangia. Sorry about that, Karen. And she is a best-selling author, a Salesforce executive, and one of the most sought-after thought leaders in the world. She hosts a podcast, Success from Anywhere, and is the author of 4 books. She has been featured in Forbes and regularly contributes to Thrive Global, Authority Magazine, and ZDNet. And listeners, feel free to check out and connect with me on my social media channels, Amy Carroll Coaching. Yogesh, thank you so much for the time. It's been a lovely conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much for having me on your show. And by the way, I'm going to check out the next episode with Carol.
Yeah, right. See, now you're like, I want to listen to Karen. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, it sounds like you said Success from Anywhere.
Success from Anywhere is her podcast. Yes.
Okay, sounds like I should get introduced to her.
I think you should. Yes. And thank you, Yogesh, for this really delightful conversation. Thank you, listeners. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the podcast on Voice America. Happy partnering, everyone.